When Charleston White said he was working with the government, the whole internet froze. He wasn't just talking about Jay, Prince Jr., he was declaring war on mob ties. How does Jay, Prince get access to open murder files with nothing blacked out? Charleston White says it's not street power, it's police power. Most rappers check in when they land in Houston, but Charleston White? He said he checked in with the police. And that's when everything exploded. He said it straight. I'm not with the mob, I'm with the nation. And that one line turned Houston's streets upside down. Charleston White just accused one of the most feared names in hip-hop of working with the police, and then claimed he's working with the feds. What happens next? You're not ready for this. Charleston White has never been one to stay quiet, and this time, he went all in. From the moment he started speaking, his message to Jay, Prince Jr. and the mob ties crew was clear. He wasn't scared of anybody. Not the streets, not the police, not Houston's so-called check-in culture. Charleston White said he didn't go to Houston for a show or any kind of public appearance. According to him, his trip wasn't about clout, promotion, or a quick paycheck. It had a deeper reason. I was working with the same people who work against Jay, Prince, he declared. The statement hit like a thunderclap. To his followers, it sounded like Charleston was hinting at federal connections. To his critics, it sounded like another wild claim. But either way, people were listening. For years, Jay, Prince and his family name have carried heavy weight in Houston's hip-hop scene. Through Rap-A-Lot Records and the idea of mob ties, the Prince family built an image of power, respect, and control, the kind that made outsiders think twice before stepping into the city unannounced. But Charleston wasn't impressed. He wasn't buying into the myth, and he wasn't afraid to call it out. He accused Jay, Prince, of having unusual access to confidential information, the kind that ordinary citizens, or even lawyers, would never get. How can he get open murder reports with nothing blacked out? Charleston asked in disbelief. How can he see names, details, and addresses that the public shouldn't even know? To him, this wasn't just a coincidence. It was evidence that something deeper was going on, something between the streets and the system that nobody wanted to talk about. Charleston has always positioned himself as a man who exposes uncomfortable truths. He built his reputation on being blunt, sometimes brutally so. And here, he was doubling down. He claimed that Jay, Prince's so-called influence might come from more than just his reputation on the streets, suggesting there could be unseen ties with certain people inside law enforcement. If he's working with the police, Charleston said, then I'm working with the government. It was a bold, almost reckless statement. But that's how Charleston operates. His defiance isn't just an act, it's a philosophy. Every word he speaks carries a challenge. Prove me wrong. He continued to question how much real power mob ties actually holds. In his eyes, it's more illusion than influence, a reputation built on fear instead of respect. They make their own people check in, he said, but that ain't how a real mob works. Real power, he argued, doesn't come from intimidating rappers and celebrities. It comes from influence that reaches judges, police chiefs, and business leaders, the kind of authority that moves silently but effectively. What mob ties had, he said, was theater, a loud performance meant to keep people in line. Charleston's comments struck a nerve. Fans, rappers, and locals took sides immediately. Some said he was brave for exposing what others only whispered about. Others said he was playing with fire, going after a family with deep roots in Houston. But Charleston didn't flinch. He made it clear he wasn't scared of anyone, not the princes, not the police, not even federal agencies. I'm ready for war with anybody, he said flatly. He used Houston's check-in culture as an example of what he believes is wrong with the industry. For years, visiting artists have been told they must check in with local gatekeepers to stay safe, a mix of respect and protection. But Charleston flipped the script. If that's really about safety, he asked, then why do bad things keep happening on your watch? Why do people keep dying? He pointed to the tragic death of Takeoff as the ultimate example. If mob ties really runs Houston, he said, then how does something like that even happen? In Charleston's eyes, that night destroyed the myth. The city wasn't under mob control, it was under chaos disguised as order. His attack went beyond music. Charleston questioned how a culture built on respect could thrive while young men were dying, communities were struggling, and fear was being sold as protection. Where is mob ties, he asked, when kids get killed? When women are hurt? When the community needs help? His voice rose with frustration. They don't show up then. They only show up when it benefits them. And yet, through all his fire, Charleston praised Houston itself. He said the city was full of real players, people who work hard, build businesses, and move with pride. He said Houston had always been about style and class, not fake gangster energy. You can wear your jewelry, go out, have fun, and enjoy yourself, he said. Houston's not the problem. It's the few trying to act like they own it. What stood out most was Charleston's message about power. To him, true power doesn't come from making people afraid, it comes from standing on something real. Respect comes from what you give back, he said. Fear only lasts until someone's not scared anymore. His words carried an edge, but they also carried truth. Whether you agree with him or not, Charleston has a way of forcing people to confront uncomfortable questions. Who really holds power in hip-hop? Who really protects the community? And how much of what we see is just an act? As he finished, he circled back to the idea that started it all, his alleged connection to the same people who work against Jay, Prince. He didn't name names. He didn't need to. The mystery was enough. To some, it sounded like a threat. To others, it was a warning. But to Charleston, it was just honesty. He ended his rant the way he always does, with conviction and confidence. "I'm not bowing down to no man," he said. "Not Jay, Prince, not his sons, not anybody. I move how I move. I'm with the nation, not the mob." And with that, he made it clear, he's not part of Houston's game. He's standing outside it, watching, criticizing, and daring anyone to challenge what he says. Whether you see him as fearless or foolish, one thing's certain, Charleston White refuses to be silent. In Charleston's view, that kind of access to police files doesn't happen by accident. It points to something deeper, inside connections with law enforcement. He framed it bluntly. If he's working with the police, then I'm working with the government. That line wasn't just bravado. It was a challenge. Charleston wanted to flip the script and force people to ask uncomfortable questions about who really holds influence and how that influence is being used. Saying you're working with the government isn't small talk in his world. It implies a different kind of power, one that operates through formal systems, subpoenas, and investigations, rather than through street reputation or intimidation. Charleston used the contrast on purpose. If one side is leaning on unofficial influence, rumor, and fear, he claimed, the other side can lean on institutions, legal weight, and federal reach. To him, that distinction makes all the difference. It reframes the fight from a turf war to something more serious, a collision between two different kinds of authority. He wasn't only speaking to enemies. He was talking to fans, critics, and anyone who'd listen. The message was threefold. First, don't confuse loud talk and showmanship for real control. Second, the appearance of protection, men who demand check-ins and act like gatekeepers, doesn't equal institutional power. And third, if someone does have inside ties with police, that changes the game entirely. Charleston wanted people to see the whole picture, not just the flash and threats. There was also a clear threat embedded in his words. "We're ready for war with anybody," he said, over and over, as if to make sure there was no misinterpretation. That warning served two purposes. It signaled that he wouldn't be intimidated, no matter how deep the other side's reach might be. And it also raised stakes, suggesting that this was no longer just talk or social media drama. For Charleston, it was a public standoff with real consequences. Whether you saw it as bluster or a genuine warning, it demanded attention. Charleston framed his stance as practical, not theatrical. He described himself as someone who'd rather expose weakness than submit to it. So when he accused certain figures of having special access to police files, he didn't present it as an accusation to settle quietly. He presented it as a problem to be exposed, investigated, and debated openly. He wanted people to question how such access could be used, whether it could be abused, and who holds the power to stop it. That move changed the tone from gossip to civic concern. People reacted predictably. Some supporters cheered him on. They saw him as a truth-teller willing to challenge established names. They liked the image of someone unafraid to take the institution head-on. Others worried. When an influencer claims they're working with the government, that can sound dangerous or reckless. Critics asked whether Charleston was inflaming tensions he could not control, or whether he was purposely baiting powerful people who could respond far beyond social media. Charleston didn't soften his voice in the face of that criticism. If anything, he doubled down, using sharp, simple lines designed to be remembered. He wanted to make his position clear. He wasn't asking for permission to speak. He wasn't looking for favors or protection. He was laying down a clear public challenge and daring anyone with questions to step forward. It was a strategic posture, bold, visible, and hard to ignore. Beyond the theatrics, there was an undercurrent of accountability in what he said. By bringing the idea of inside access into public conversation, Charleston forced others to reckon with it. If someone truly had access to sensitive files, the public has a right to ask why and how. If officials were involved, the question becomes one of oversight and transparency. For Charleston, exposing the issue was a way of shifting power toward inquiry rather than silence. In the end, his statement did more than taunt. It reframed the dispute around power, law, and public interest. Whether or not the claims were provable, Charleston succeeded in pushing the conversation away from mere street reputation and toward the larger question: when influence crosses into official channels, what happens to fairness, safety, and justice? He left the challenge on the table, bold, pointed, and impossible to ignore, and in doing so made it clear that his battle was not just personal. It was, he said, institutional. His words didn't stop at Jay, Prince. He went after Houston's entire mob ties culture, that unwritten rule that rappers and outsiders are expected to check in for protection. Charleston mocked the idea, asking, "Why should I have to check in? Did Taylor Swift check in? Did Post Malone or Khloe Kardashian check in? So why should I?" He claimed he had just passed through Houston recently without telling a soul. "I went through Houston to Beaumont. Didn't check in with nobody," he said proudly. "Now, if I'm checking in with anyone, it's the police." Charleston even claimed the Houston Police Department and city officials had contacted him directly, warning that many were afraid to stand up to Jay, Prince, and his camp. "They told me straight up, they're scared of Rap-A-Lot," he said. Still, Charleston didn't back down. No matter how many people warned him, no matter how heated the online debates became, he stood firm on his view. To him, Houston wasn't a trap or a death zone, it was a city full of energy, movement, and opportunity. He refused to buy into the idea that you had to tiptoe around anyone or check in just to exist there. In his eyes, Houston was what he called a player's city, a place where real people could shine, where you could wear your jewelry, drive your car, walk around, and live freely without bowing down to fear or ego. Charleston made a point of separating fact from myth. He acknowledged that yes, there were dangers, just like in any big city, but he refused to let fear define the narrative. "People act like Houston's some kind of war zone," he said. "It's not. It's a player's town. You can move how you want to if you move smart." To him, the problem wasn't the city, it was the culture of intimidation that some people tried to impose. He believed that if you carry yourself with confidence and respect, you don't have to answer to self-proclaimed gatekeepers. When he brought up Takeoff's death, he did so carefully but firmly. He called it what it was, a tragedy, a heartbreaking moment that shouldn't have happened. But he refused to let that single event define the entire city. "What happened to Takeoff was sad," he said, "but that's not the rule. That's not how Houston is." In Charleston's mind, one tragic incident shouldn't paint an entire population as dangerous or lawless. He wanted to remind people that thousands of artists, fans, and everyday folks go out in Houston every weekend, and they make it home safe. "You can still go out, party, and have fun all over Houston," he said confidently. "That's not something you can say about LA." That last line struck a nerve. It wasn't just a comparison, it was a statement about perception and safety. He was saying that despite the stories and headlines, Houston still had structure, respect, and balance. Los Angeles, in his view, had become unpredictable, a place where people get targeted for fame, jewelry, or social media clout. Houston, on the other hand, still had rules that made sense. To Charleston, it came down to culture. Houston's energy, he said, was rooted in pride and community. It wasn't perfect, but it had a rhythm, a sense of understanding between those who live and move through it. People who respected the city got that respect back. That, to him, was what made it special. So when people tried to scare him away or call him reckless for walking freely through Houston, he laughed it off. He believed the city rewarded courage, not arrogance, but real confidence. In his words, Houston wasn't about fear, it was about freedom. And as long as he could speak his truth, he wasn't going to let anyone rewrite that. In the end, Charleston made it clear, he's not playing by the same rules as everyone else. He refuses to be intimidated, refuses to check in, and refuses to stay quiet about what he sees as corruption and control in Houston's hip-hop scene. Whether you love him or hate him, he's going to say what others are too scared to. Charleston White isn't backing down. When mob ties gets brought up, especially around Dallas, He makes his stance clear. They don't run anything there. He recalled being at DG's when Houston came through, throwing money and showing off. They're only tough around the ones they think are weak, he said. But when they come up here, they stay in line. With Takeoff's death still fresh in people's minds, Charleston aimed straight at Jay, Prince Jr., and the image of mob ties. He said what many only whisper, that they're not really a mob at all. It's not mob ties, he said. It's rap-a-lot ties. They don't have real power like the Italian mob in New York, no unions, no construction deals, no judges in their pocket. They're just playing gangster, needing to check in for safety. Stay away from Jay, Prince Jr., and you'll be fine in Houston, he said. The moment you fall for that come hang with us trick, that's when you get caught up in something you can't control. Charleston claimed he'd even heard first-hand stories about what went down the night Takeoff was killed. That dice game wasn't random, he said. It was the same crew setting things up. If you like to gamble, that's who you'll run into, and that's where people get trapped. But beyond the accusations, Charleston made one point over and over: Houston is a player's city. You can have fun, enjoy the night, wear your jewelry, and go home safe. Houston's always been about style and business, he said. Yeah, they can get gangster, but only when they have to. They're not out here forcing fear onto their own people. Then he flipped the question back on mob ties themselves. If y'all really run Houston, he said, then why do bad things keep happening on your watch? When kids get killed, when women get hurt, where's mob ties then? Where's the help for the community? To Charleston, all that mob ties talk is just a show, fake power that looks big but stands on nothing real. That checkin' stuff ain't respect, he said. It's just extortion with a different name. Real power comes from respect, not intimidation. Nah man, take off those rules and stops, we don't owe y'all nothing. Charleston said it plain, he won't bow down to any check-in culture. If he wanted, he joked, he could hire white sheriff types to guard him, but he'd rather use a black security team. Still, he made it clear, he won't be forced to check in just so someone can keep tabs on him. He pointed out how a real mob works. Everybody pays, judges, police chiefs, beat cops. That's not what he sees with mob ties. To him, making your own people check in isn't power, it's pretending to have power. That ain't respect, he said. It's just intimidation wrapped in fancy words. Charleston also called out people he thinks were fooled, saying some folks, like Whack 100, tricked Jay, Prince into looking weaker than he used to. He argued Jay, Prince Sr. used to carry more quiet respect, but now the image has changed. Lots of this, Charleston says, looks like smoke and mirrors. He told people not to be scared to visit Houston. Ain't nobody running the city but God, he said. On camera, he watched Jay, Prince Jr. closely, and said he looks nervous, like he's been cornered by bigger forces. Charleston even suggested the feds are involved, and that's why some people seem uneasy. He kept saying he and others know what's happening behind the scenes. Charleston denied claiming any gang or trying to represent one city. I represent a nation, he said. He bragged about being ready to defend himself and his family, saying he's got land, resources, and protection. He used tough language to stress he's prepared to fight if pushed. Still, he hammered the point home, a name tied to violence and chaos isn't worth respect. If those people really cared about the city, why do bad things keep happening on their watch? Where's their help when kids are hurt or crimes go unsolved? To Charleston, that's the real test of power. He closed by saying the check-in culture needs to end. Put the spotlight on the problems instead of hiding them, he argued. Fans are split. Some call him brave for speaking out. Others say he's stirring danger. Regardless, Charleston isn't backing down. He's loud, unfiltered, and forcing a conversation about fear, power, and what safety should actually look like in Houston.